Started at the bottom, and we still at the bottom. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Fourth and Frames. And tonight, I am Rhett Manuel. Right next to me, the man on my right, Nate Markham. Drew Scott, as always, being the adamant family man at one of his children's games. So we appreciate him doing the right thing and looking out for his kids. But as always, wish he could be here. As tonight we get into week 7 of the fantasy football season, where we talk about our smash, pass, and stash players. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get it popping.
This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.
And for all our subscribers, viewers, listeners, whatever you want to call yourselves, thank you for stopping in with us tonight. As always, do not forget to like, subscribe, review, say hi, drop a comment, whatever you need to do. Just let us know that you're showing us some love so that anytime a new podcast, a new short form video, a new article, whatever it is that drops over at fantasyandframes.com, where you can also see the latest for rankings, articles, takes, hot takes, news and notes, whatever you need to in the fantasy football or hockey realms. You have access to it by going over to fantasyandframes.com and subscribing on YouTube. But we're locked in on week 7 tonight, Nate Markham. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing good. You said a word that kicked me into, oh yeah, we need to do this at some point. We haven't talked about the Fourth and Frames Listener League for a minute for our listeners, subscribers, friends, family members, etc. And give a quick rundown, because I think some of these people need some props. And first and foremost, Paul Ryan, team name Paul Ryan 15, is 6-0 on the season, just running house, highest points in the league, obviously undefeated, as I just mentioned. He gets yours truly this week, which I'm 5-1. I'm in second place, right on his heels. This is a battle for first place, kind of. If I win, I'm still down in points. But Mr. Chris Battistel is right behind at 4-2. Kurt Brown is at 4-2 as well. Mr. Scampers himself sitting comfortably in 5th at 3-3 with the man himself, Jorge Edwards. Prismatic Porter again at 3-3. And then we talk about, unfortunately, we can skip over this bottom part if you'd like there, Rhett. But realistically, QK16, Drew, and then I don't want to leave out, B and Albert, but then Rhett, there's bound. It's bound.
Bring it up the rear
to turn around. 1-5 does not mean it's over. I promise you that. It is not over. So take your own advice. Take all this fantastic content that you put out, and let's see how we can, put that into effect. Because I know Charlene's rooting for you. I know that. She's one of your biggest supporters. Angie's right there with you as well. And then even Robert Thomas is there. And, I don't know how much more support you can need. I don't know if they can actually make your team perform any better. But let's not worry about our teams. Let's worry about everybody else's teams, like Albert's, who, maybe Albert needs a little bit of help too. But I'll let you have the floor.
Nate, there's a reason we have been talking about the Fourth and Frames Fantasy League, and that's because I'm in last place. At 1-5, let's just say things haven't gone according to plan. Bijan Robinson has not Bijan Robinson to his abilities. Dalton Kincaid has very much flatlined. Jalen Wright has been a bomb. Cooper Kupp has been hurt. We are at this point. But Cooper might be back this week.
Yeah.
So there's hope rings eternal as always. But at the end of the day, and Tua is on IR too because he got rung in the head one too many times.
And he might be back too.
All this to say, guys, it's fine. I'm glad you guys are having fun with us. I'm glad we're having this experience this year. And even if my name in the league, the Luminary, is a little bit ironic, guess what? I think it serves as a great punchline at the end of the day that you guys have taken the Luminary to the woodshed. So at the end of the day, what are we without you guys? And I'm just here to pump all your egos up. So if anything, Nate Markham, you can say quite simply that I am a martyr for our listeners. And that's all you can really say at the end of the day.
It's a hero right there, everybody. That is
ladies
a
and gentlemen,
heroic stance by Rep Manuel. That's,
of course,
it's impressive.
Nothing without you guys. So after talking about how terrible everything has gone in the Fourth and Frames Listener League for me, Nate, let's get into some news and notes, buddy. Anything of note happened over the past couple of days? Anything at all, Bueller?
I mean, let's see. Has anything? I mean, maybe there might have been a couple. I'd say significant is not too much of a stretch for some trades. Of course, obviously. Where do you want to start? You want to start with the reunion, the band getting back together, Devontae Adams going to the Jets, and I guess I would have a question for you as realistic, and probably the question everybody had. Direct impact on all playmakers in New York. The easy way to look at that is one of twofold. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but you get what I'm getting at. Is will the addition of Devontae Adams actually make the offense better, therefore potentially making Garrett Wilson at the same level or maybe better, probably not? Or does Devontae Adams being the new, not even the shiny new toy, it's the old toy that he finally got back that he never wanted to quit playing with, he's going to play with again, and Garrett Wilson will never see the 17 target light of day? What's your take?
I talked about this yesterday on a radio show that I did. Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers are the definite winners out of all of this. Garrett Wilson, for as much as he had been starting to build rapport with Aaron Rodgers the past couple of weeks, I mean, we know at the end of the day that when Aaron Rodgers has a guy, that guy is going to be fed, and he's going to be fed handsomely. And no one has probably been a bigger Aaron Rodgers guy in the history of his career than Devontae Adams. So this deal happened for a reason. I do think it makes the Jets better as a football team. I think the immediate boost is for Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams. I do think Garrett Wilson takes a hit. And I do think Breece Hall still maintain value because he is the primary back in that offense. But my man Pareko wanted to ask us a question about Breece Hall with this Rodgers news. And he wanted to know if he should trade Breece Hall for Malik Neighbors and Tony Pollard.
Dude, number one, me being, St. Louis Cardinals fan, any answer for anyone named Pareko? Technically, we have two St. Louis Blues names, at least in the chat. We have Robert Thomas and Pareko. So for the hockey podcast that Fantasy and Frames has as well, they would be thrilled to know that I incorporate hockey into this in some capacity. That being said, you're looking for an answer from me, and I want to say yes. I really do, because I think Malik Neighbors will be back this week. I think maybe it might be next week when we really start to see the return, coming off the concussion, missing as much as he has. But I haven't lost a lot of faith, in Tony Pollard, yet. And so I still think he's more than serviceable. I don't think he's that far of removed. I mean, Breece Hall's still fantastic. We saw it last on Monday night, but was that a product? And I think we talked about this last week, or maybe it was on Sunday morning. It was against Buffalo, and their run D is so bad. Maybe you can. Maybe that's the reason why he's getting the opportunity to trade for Neighbors and Pollard. So personally, I'm actually okay with that, especially if you need the wide receiver help.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at the wide receiver help, there is not many guys in fantasy football right now that I'm taking above Malik Neighbors, regardless of format. I mean, he's just been, despite the concussion a couple weeks ago, I mean, there have not been many guys who've been as looked at as he has been. as productive as he's been, as impressive as he's been on tape, I mean, Malik Neighbors is the complete package. And I would say, especially if this is a dynasty format, which this is probably a redraft thing, but either way, you're getting a running back in Tony Pollard, who probably at his peak can get you 85 to 90% of Breece Hall, and getting a guy who is probably in fantasy points per game, a very good chance to be a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy points per game by the end of the year. So for me, I agree as well. It's a slam dunk for you. I would do that deal in a heartbeat.
Yep, there you go, Pareko. And Robert Thomas is stuck with not only Robert Thomas of the Blues, but Rob Thomas of Matchbox 20.
Yes.
But you're the only Robert Thomas that we care about, because those other two aren't in the chat. If they were, I mean, let's be honest, we probably would give them some attention, but you've stuck with this, tried and true. So we take care of our own.
And Robert, I'm going to say this. No, not F Matchbox 20. I'm just going to tell you, Robert, that if the bright lights don't receive you, you can turn yourself around and come back home to the Fourth and Frames podcast, baby.
Coming from the luminary who the lights aren't always off, as he will tell you. There's always a glimmer of hope.
We will leave the light up for you as well. We're dropping in multiple references tonight.
What is that? The not Red Roof, the Motel 6?
Motel 6, that's right.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, so
go ahead.
Pareko says his other running backs are Kyron Williams, Travis Etienne, and Jonathan Brooks, and his wide receivers are Justin Jefferson, Deontay Johnson, Jalen Waddle, and Tank Dell in a 12-team super flex.
That kind of changes my opinion a little bit, because
I think it does.
I think I would rather keep the better running back and not have to, because I think just Jefferson, and then Dell has shown that he looked back to normal this past week, but I'm fine with either direction. If you make that move because, you want to make that, is it 3? If it's 3 wide receivers, that can change things too. If it's 3 wide receivers in a flex, there's a lot of different options, but I don't know if I trust necessarily ETN, of course not right now with the shoulder. And then Jonathan Brooks, I really was at week 1. I was loving the idea of him coming back in around week 6, week 7, week 8, but I don't know if it's anything more than a 60-40 workload between him and Chuba.
Chuba's been so good. My God.
So good. It's crazy bad for me.
Yeah, but
Tom
continuing through these Newton, yes, Tom Bodette, he'll leave the light on for you. My God, this is going off the rails pretty early in the game. Let's keep rolling. Amari Cooper,
yes, sir,
traded to the Buffalo Bills, gives them a surefire wide receiver 1 after the Dalton Kincaid experience hasn't really worked out, huh?
Yeah, I mean No, it hasn't. I still have hope. I want to be the eternal optimist when it comes to it. If you look at last week in routes run, Dalton Kincaid was still the number 1 option on that team in terms of total routes, but he just hasn't. Adding Amari Cooper is not going to help his target share. That's what concerns me. And yeah, so I'm disappointed. That's what that was. That was disappointment in my voice by Dalton Kincaid not being the tight end 1 overall through 6 weeks.
Yeah, you know what the funny thing about NFL trades is? They're not worried about our fantasy football teams. They're trying to win a Super Bowl. So I mean, Dalton Kincaid getting sidelined because of Amari Cooper in terms of target share. I mean, not great for us, but interesting there. Charlene does have a thing where she says drop Khalil Shakir for Pop Douglas. I'll be approaching that question in a little while, Charlene. Stay tuned. Robert Thomas, once again, of Matchbox 20 and St. Louis Blues fame. He asked if Aaron Jones is playing this week. What are you doing with him short and long term? And Ty Chandler. Nate, what you got?
I've been a huge Ty Chandler fan all season. This is kind of it's not what I've hoped would happen. I never want to see Aaron Jones injured, but we knew that there was a chance that it was going to happen. Aaron Jones wasn't necessarily, or Ty Chandler wasn't fantastic last week. He's still explosive. I think for the short term, I don't know. I kind of said Aaron Jones was a sell high 2 weeks ago. I didn't want to say I thought he was going to fall off because there was no indicator necessarily, but I didn't love his long-term outlook. If you have Chandler, I think this week is a pretty decent option. And then if you're realistically long-term is, golly, I feel like I'm just dancing around this question because I have my bias built in that I want Ty Chandler to be a thing and I like what I see. So I don't want to give I don't want to give biased information, but unfortunately that's what I do here is I'm going to say invest, get Ty Chandler and hope that maybe he carves out even a larger role than what he's already done.
Yeah, and I think I'm with you on that. As for these next two notes, I think Drew Scott is plotting his revenge on me. Rashid Shaheed missed practice. Report came out today that it is a torn meniscus and that he is going to go on IR and possibly miss the rest of the season. Chris Olave in concussion protocol did not practice, will not play tomorrow night. So Nate Markham, I hope you're excited to watch for the first time in a long time the Bub Means experience come to life tomorrow night. So I guess the question becomes for you, is there any part of this Saints Broncos game that you want for fantasy purposes tomorrow night?
Maybe, I guess tight end landscape's pretty nasty. Maybe Juwan Johnson. He's been getting a little more involved, and I think that the looks could go his way. Charlene wants to know if we'd pick up Javonte over Ty Chandler to replace Jones if he's out. Golly. I mean, I think Javonte probably has a safer floor just from volume standpoint as far as I think the Denver's willingness to want to run the ball. But yeah, my bias. I still think that Chandler, the upside for 20 plus points is with Chandler more than it is with Javonte. Agree? Disagree?
Yeah, I would say that Chandler has a higher upside. I think if you are in a place where you just need some floor points, I think Javonte probably is a safer play. But at this point, if you're like me in the Fourth and Frames listener league and you're 1-5, you're chasing upside. So I'd be starting Chandler at this point too. So, Mr. Scampers dropped in the comments saying, "Good evening, gentlemen. Scampers, we love you. Thank you for joining us as you do every week." One more note we want to get to, probably the brain scratcher of the week, Nate Markham. Russell Wilson is getting first team reps and looks like he's going to start this week, despite the fact that the Steelers are 4-2 with Justin Fields. Justin Fields has thrown 10 touchdowns against 1 interception, gives them more rushing upside, and generally has done a very good job in keeping that team out of trouble. Discuss.
I don't know. I don't. I feel like it's one of those things that, there's a phrasing of being Wally pipped, and that's a baseball reference where if you get hurt, you don't lose your job to the understudy, if you will. And I feel like maybe this is Pittsburgh's way of saying he was never going to get Wally pipped. We're going to give him a chance to come out, show us that he can go, 16 for 26 for 179 yards and 1 touchdown, no interception. That's my, made up predicted line for him. But that sounds pretty boring, which is exactly what Russ will do. But I have a question for you and really for anybody out in the chat as well. Is there benefit to a player like George Pickens with the addition of Russ Wilson long-term?
God, that's such a good question, because if I'm going to say one thing, it's this. Justin Fields has made his hay in the league as a runner. Agreed?
Correct.
But the tape out of college was that he was pretty darn good at throwing the deep ball. So, the George Pickens thing hasn't happened yet this year in terms of having a breakout game. At the same time, there have been some big receptions that have been called back due to penalty that George Pickens has made this year. So, 6 to 1, half a dozen of another. I just don't see why you make a change for change's sake when your team is in a just fine spot right now and you have a quarterback who's been running the offense pretty efficiently.
Right. We'll circle back to George Pickens too.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm not an NFL general manager. I'm not an NFL head coach. Those aren't my calls. I just do fantasy football stuff on Wednesday nights on the internet. So it's not for me to decide. Go Steelers. Speaking of making calls, ladies and gentlemen, you can make calls every week at Underdog, formerly known as Underdog Fantasy, and you can do so quite handsomely because they're offering you free money if you use our promo code Frames. Nate,
money?
Do you like free money?
I do.
Okay, you can get up to 100% matchup up to your deposit of $1,000. So deposit one stack, get another stack for free 99, baby. So Underdog is doing that for you with our promo code Frames. Don't miss out on all the fun and all the action over at Underdog today.
I don't have that Tom Bodette money, unfortunately, or Rob/Ert Thomas cash. So I need all the free money I can get.
I don't have that Matchbox 20 money, baby, but it's fine.
Nope.
But what we do have is our smash, pass, and stash picks for this week, Nate Markham.
We do.
If you remember correctly, our smash plays are players that are outside the top 20, the top 15 running backs, the top 8 tight ends, or the top 12 quarterbacks that we think will perform this week. Our pass players are players that are inside the top 35 wide receivers, the top 20 running backs, the top 12 tight ends, and top 20 quarterbacks that we think will underperform. And our stash players are, of course, players that we believe in, that we like that are rostered in under 50% of sleeper leagues. So give you a little bit of everything here at Fourth and Frames. And Nate, you're going to start us off tonight with one of my absolute favorite players so far this season. Tell us why the Cleveland Browns will once again be a victim this week and who they will be a victim to.
Yeah, the former Illinois Illini Chase Brown, which if you look from the defensive side from Cleveland, which is weird that a full year later that we would use Cleveland as an exploitable defense, but they have been. I mean, they've allowed the 5th highest explosive run rate so far. They're 11th in yards per carry allowed. They've allowed the 6th highest touchdown rate. You know, and last week, well, really the past 3 weeks, what we've seen is a trend in the Chase Brown direction. Not a full-on roster flop or a flip in terms of position and overall opportunities, but a subtle shifting and a turning of the tides, if you will. And then what we see, Zach Moss fumbled in the 3rd quarter. That pretty much was the straw that broke the proverbial don't give Chase Brown enough carries back. And then I think that's going to be a precursor going forward. The last 3 weeks, Chase has averaged nearly 20, basically double. It's like 18 fantasy points a game versus Moss's 9. Chase is just utilized. He's, even when you get like a mediocre game to start off, what does he do? He reels off 2 or 3 catches, gets into the end zone, much more explosive than Zach Moss. The idea of this offense just continuing to improve is evident. I mean, with T. Higgins back, the Bengals look like the offense that I want every piece of, and Chase Brown is a major piece of that, especially against this Cleveland defense. So I'm all in Chase Brown again this week, having another, low end RB1, high end RB2. I don't want to say floor, but I'm going to say floor.
Truthfully, the last 3 weeks of Chase Brown, if you look at what he's done over the past 3 weeks, in week 4 against Carolina, 40% snap share, 23.2 fantasy points, RB6. Week 5 against Baltimore, 39.7% snap share, 16.4 running fantasy PPR fantasy points, running back 11. Last week against the New York Giants, 60% snap share, 64 total yards, touchdown, 14.4 fantasy points, RB20. So what you're seeing is a guy that is getting into the end zone and is being super efficient with everything that he does on a week-to-week basis. And those are the type of players, especially at this point in the season, that are worth a start on a weekly basis, because consistency in fantasy football is not always easy to find. And especially in a season where guys like Christian McCaffrey haven't played at all. Tyreek Hill hasn't been Tyreek Hill. A.J. Brown has been battling this hamstring stuff all year long. Having those guys who can give you some consistency whether it's out of a wide receiver 1 position or a guy that you can have as a second running back or a flex spot. I mean, consistency matters in a year where injuries have played such a role throughout fantasy football.
Yeah, it's been the key is to trust. Like, I think people looking at this surface see, oh, he's still not out touching him. It was a fluky, but if watching the game, you see every touch that Chase Brown has is just twice as impactful from an explosive standpoint to just the trust that you see the Bengals instill in him, especially if he's getting the high value touches, which he continues to do so. So, who has the most high value touches, or who touches the ball in the most valuable position? Well, probably a quarterback. Who's a quarterback that maybe you think is a super smash play this week, Rhett?
Oh, we're going to the Wayback Machine. We're going to take it back to whenever Kirk Cousins' rookie year was, and we're just going to hit you with a quick, you like that. But I like late era Kirk Cousins. I like the Kirk O'Chains moniker. I just love everything about it. And I love the fact that he's starting to get comfortable in this Atlanta offense. He enters this week as the Fantasy Pros ECR quarterback 13, which is right outside that quarterback 1 realm. And he's playing a Seattle team that has given up 17.4 points per game to quarterbacks, but that's been skewed by some early season numbers because over the past 3 weeks, they've given up 26.7 fantasy points to Jared Goff, good offense, 22.1 fantasy points to Daniel Jones, not good offense, 24.1 fantasy points to Brock Purdy, good offense. Atlanta, I think we can agree, pretty good offense all around. We've seen it over the past couple of weeks. Kirk Cousins is getting time to throw the ball. There was worries about his Achilles and whether he'd be able to get around. He has a 92.9% protection rate in the pocket. They're running 2.22 plays per minute. He's thrown an elite deep ball all season long. And now he's playing a Seattle defense that, although they do run a higher man rate than most of the league, 30.4%, that still means that they're in zone 62% of the time. And Kirk Cousins has said the 5th best completion percentage against zone in the league this season. We just talked about Drake London. Drake London has come out in a big way the past couple of weeks, something like 22 targets, 18 receptions. Darnell Mooney has had a really good year so far. Ray McLeod has been a solid third option for them as well. So Seattle, who has not been very good against wide receivers this season and quarterbacks for that matter, has a lot of ground to cover against 3 wide receivers, not to mention Bijan Robinson, not to mention Tyler Algier, and not to mention the potential ghost of Kyle Pitts as well. So there are a lot of Atlanta weapons to cover, and you can't cover them all, which means at some point Kirk Cousins is probably going to find an open man with that elite pocket protection he has, and he should be in a really good spot to perform well this week.
Yeah, you touched on the one thing that I point out too is that offensive line has been playing extremely well as far as keeping him upright. And you get a Seattle pass rush that for the most part is non-existent. Last week side where they actually had production against a decently stout 49ers offensive line, which was kind of, I'm looking at it as a one-off when they can't generate much more than, barely double-digit pressures against the New York Giants offensive line that is more than porous. So I see Cousins getting plenty of time. I don't know if they're going to throw the ball 58 times or not, or 57 or whatever the number was last week. But I do think that this offense is comfortable putting the ball in his hands enough. And let's be honest, the Atlanta defense will have their hands full with Seattle's offense it might be, a tit for tat passing game. Because, I think that could very easily be that way.
We saw it last week in New Orleans, right? That second quarter alone, where those two teams went back and forth, and it was 27-24 at halftime. And then in the second half, Baker Mayfield just absolutely destroys. But you looked at it in that game, when you have teams that are scoring points, even if it was a one-sided aspect, Baker Mayfield ends up with a big week. Yep. Sean Tucker, who hadn't done anything in the league previously, and Chris Godwin were both the running back 1 and the wide receiver 1 in fantasy football last week. So when you're scoring points in good offenses in high-scoring games, guess what? Those fantasy points are going to follow, baby. And so this could be a very good matchup pretty much across the board, whether you are a Kenneth Walker guy, a DK Metcalf guy, a JSN guy. if you're a Ray McCall guy, he's probably worth a flex start this week. I mean, this is just one of those games where there are a lot of good offensive weapons.
Yep.
And two offenses that are very efficient at what they do. So you could end up seeing one of these 30-something, 20-something games where a lot of fantasy points are scored and everybody walks out happy, despite the fact that one team may lose and one team may win. All your fantasy people may end up winning in the long run this week.
Except for Kyle Pitts owners. You'll always be miserable. Hello, Rachel. Tootsie Pop joins us as well. Just in time for me for the Kyle Pitts slander, the daily or weekly occurrence that it's not an occurrence. It's pretty one-off that we actually slander his name. It's pretty nice of us to be so supportive and positive for the Kyle Pitts, whatever you call this season. It's
shout out Drew Scott and his constant support of the Kyle Pitts Island and the real estate he owns over there.
Yeah, exactly.
But Nate, speaking of shout out, let's give a shout out to my boy Mike Casherwick over at FFRPG. Over the summer, he and I did, prior to the NFL draft, a study of your next Smash player for the week. Man, I love Ladd McConkey. He's facing the Arizona Cardinals. Tell us why he's going to be a success this week.
Yeah, and I haven't really, on the season, I had tempered expectations for Ladd McConkey's just smash upside because of the run-heavy approach by the Chargers. But I look at this as kind of the perfect storm, if you will, where, Arizona's pass D, attacked by slot receivers, the 13th highest clip. So 34% of the targets go to the slot. Consider the Cardinals allow a significant amount of targets to the running back position as well. And I don't see the Chargers being as, running back target centric as some of the other teams that Arizona's faced. Maybe that could funnel more to the inline, to that slot position, further supporting Ladd McConkey's floor. And, what has he done? He's led the Chargers in targets each of the past 3 games. While, yes, I know he's 53rd amongst wide receivers with 20-plus targets and catchable target rate. Guess what? Arizona's the medicine for what ails them because they allow the 3rd highest catch rate and they top 10 catchable target rate. The matchup is ideal as far as Ladd being in the slot. I know, we all know that it is a run-heavy, centric offense, but I don't think that a 10-target, 6-7 catch game is even laughable or not downright almost projectable in this matchup against an offense that will Arizona be able to continue to move the ball on the other side of the, I don't know that 100% without Marvin Harrison. I'm not quite sure, but if I had to bet, I think it's going to be more high scoring. The Cardinals would like to make it more high scoring than being off the field or being ran down their throats by the rushing attack by the Chargers.
Yeah, I mean, just over the past few weeks, I mean, we've kind of seen the trend with the Los Angeles Chargers, like you've mentioned. I mean, yeah, they want to run the ball, but Justin Herbert, despite the fact that he hasn't been able to, he hasn't been asked to do a ton, has still been pretty darn efficient throwing the football this season. He set a season high last week in passing yards. I know that number was only something like 240, but still, nonetheless, season high, which means there could be a possible upward trend in how much they're throwing the ball, especially now that, Gus Edwards on IR, J.K. Dobbins, you kind of got to manage the load. Kamani Vidal had the receiving touchdown last week out of the backfield on the wheel route. I mean, there are signs that there is a possibility that we might see the Chargers throw the ball a little bit more as the season goes on. And speaking of teams that are getting ready to throw the ball a little bit more, before I talk about my next smash play, Nate, what were your thoughts on Drake May's full debut last week?
Fantasy-wise, I was pretty impressed. I really like what I see as far as, everything that we're looking. We want the rushing upside. He didn't have a tendency from what I saw. Granted, was it in this incredible performance? No, but you saw glimmers of hope. And I think that anything compared to Jacoby Brissett is going to be improved. They let him throw the ball 33 times, which is automatically number one. Did he turn the ball over? Sure. But it was, hey, I think that it's as positive for not just the person you're going to name, but I think there could be, I think you could support 2 wide receivers in this offense if they continue to let him throw 30 plus times a game as they did.
Yeah, and first, before we go any further, I think you mispronounced his name. I believe his actual name is Jabroni Brisket, but that's just personal preference on my part.
I don't speak Spanish.
So Robert Thomas says he's all in on Pop Douglas with Drake May now. Charlene asks if we should drop Khalil Shakir for Pop Douglas. Guys, it's like you read my mind because my smash play for this week against the Jacksonville Jaguars is Pop Douglas. What? 2 weeks ago, Pop was the wide receiver 36. Last week with Drake May under center, he moves up and he is wide receiver 8 on the week. Last week with Drake May under center, Pop Douglas had a season high in receiving yards, air yards, and he found the end zone, one of Drake May's 3 touchdown passes. In the 3 weeks where Pop Douglas has had a target share of 23% or greater, he's finished as a wide receiver 3. That's happened 3 times this year. He's finished as a wide receiver 3 or better in all 3 of those games this year. And he gets just one of those matchups this year in fantasy football that we kind of been highlighting every week as we've been prepping these show sheets. He gets the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah.
And when you have Drake May, who likes to push the ball upfield, it works out pretty well that Pop Douglas is kind of becoming the guy that's separating himself as the wide receiver 1 in New England. We've kind of been wondering, who is that going to be? There's some Jalen Polk hope there. Javon Baker flashed in preseason. In hindsight, it was only preseason, but it is what it is. To me, it always kind of felt like it was going to end up being Pop Douglas's job based off of the fact that last year he did it with lesser talent than Jacoby Brissett or Drake May. And now that Drake May is in the saddle, we really saw what the ceiling of Pop Douglas could be, because before he's kind of always just been sort of a slide guy. Last week we saw him get upwards of nearly 100 air yards in that game. Had 8 targets, had the touchdown catch. And it all adds up to the fact that the Jacksonville Jaguars have also given up receiving touchdowns to receivers in every game this season but one. So all that to say is, after an encouraging start for Drake May last week, he has a chance to very much take it 2 for 2 against a Jacksonville team that, number one, Doug Peterson is probably scrambling for his job right now. And number 2, just hasn't been very good defensively. So this feels like a very good Pop Douglas week with a secondary shout out to Drake May as a secondary smash in this situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Drake May was close to being, I had a hard time putting him as a smash in here, but it was definitely a, super flex if he's even remotely out there, which he probably wasn't, but even certain bye week situations, could you do worse? Sure, because I think the rushing upside is there to support if they get within, especially with Ramondre being banged up and really I don't want to say lack of rushing game upside, but within the 5, I don't trust any running backs more than I would trust Drake May to keep the ball in his hands. So, I mean, you may see, and I know the Josh Allen, Drake May comparisons, I don't want to go there and just start regurgitating what everybody else was saying before the season started, but there's enough correlation in terms of, that makes sense. Sure. He's big enough. They trust him within the 5 or within the 2 or 3. Yeah. Throw in 1 rushing touchdown every couple games, and all of a sudden that floor is even higher.
38 rushing yards for Drake May last week as well, too. So that's worth considering. And just for those of us who, just to kind of take this stereotype a little bit further for us, if you go to player profiler right now and you look at Drake May's page, and you look at the best comparable player, the low-hanging fruit is there, ladies and gentlemen. Per player profiler, Drake May's best comparable player, Josh Allen.
Oh, there you go.
I don't make the rules. I just play by them. So our smash players that we've talked about this week, to recap, Nate went with Chase Brown. I went with Kirk Cousins. Then he bounced back with Ladd McConkey. And I went with Pop Douglas. Now, in terms of past players, Nate, you seem to just kind of be playing in my mind this week, because I also mentioned on that radio spot I did yesterday that it might be a good time to sell Jordan Mason. And here you are having him as a pass this week against Kansas City.
Yeah.
Talk to me, man.
Yeah. We, ironically, I was with Bob Harris and Mike Dempsey on Sirius talking about the same thing right after that Thursday night game with the Jordan Mason. It looked like an AC joint injury that night. That's what we kind of talked about. It has been revealed that that's what that was. AC joints have been tricky over the years. I'm far from a Twitter doctor, but what it tells me is that I wouldn't expect a full workload if he plays. And if he doesn't play, obviously it's a no-brainer. You're not playing Jordan Mason, but it's not just a shoulder injury. It's also the matchup. Of course, being the homer, I'm going to say don't start your running backs against Kansas City if it was warranted. There were plenty of years where I said start your running backs against Kansas City because they allow 5.5 yards per clip. This isn't one of those years. I mean, if you look back at the season, they haven't allowed a running back to have more than 46 yards in a game. Think of those running backs they faced. Derrick Henry, the combination of the aforementioned Chase Brown, Zach Moss, Bijan, J.K., Alvin Kamara. Yes, they allowed Lamar Jackson to rush for that many, but they've been very stingy in allowing the running backs to get any use whatsoever. So it's a combination. It's the low-hanging fruit of avoid because if there's injury, yes, but still, how is the way that I could use him in our smash and pass is that he has to fall within a certain criteria, and that is that Fantasy Pros scoring or rankings, if you look at that, it says, hey, they still think there's an upside. But yeah, I'm not thrilled with Jordan Mason. You said sell Jordan Mason. So if you're selling him, next man up in San Francisco, do you believe that Isaac Guerrero, or do you think that it's not even, you think that if there's too many running backs in a room, you actually don't have any type scenario?
I thought last week Guerrero started off a little bit slowly and then kind of found his stride and had some big plays toward the end. I think the stat line ended up being like 11 carries, 99 yards, which just goes to show you this about this San Francisco system. I was listening to Alfredo Brown and Dave Kluge earlier this week, and pretty much with every running back they've drafted, it's worked, save for two. Trey Sermon and Ty Davis Price, and they haven't really worked anywhere in the league to this point. So those are just straight up misses on their part. So if Isaac Guerrero comes out and he flashes immediately like he did, I mean, there is in the San Francisco system pretty much a possibility that anybody that they can plug and play in there is probably going to end up producing for them. So Ishmael is out here. He has a question for us. He's dropping Rashid Shaheed. Rest in peace to my dog. Should he grab Pop Douglas or Juju, or if he has Mahomes, Tyreek, Drake London, Chris Godwin, and Rondell Robinson? Pop or Juju?
Man. I think the better offense is Kansas City. I would rather link to the better offense. Do I think Pop Douglas is not in a situation that has a ceiling more so than, I don't know anymore. I believe that Juju has a good role within the offense, but I don't believe that last week was a week in and week out identifier of how good it's going to be. So I still lean Juju, but it's closer than what I normally would have said just based off of Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback versus Drake May attached to the better quarterback. Which way you leaning?
Honestly, once again, being the research man that I am, might have been the same podcast that I was listening to. Kansas City has pretty much slid Juju directly into that Rashee Rice role, which means it's not athleticism based. It's get the ball in his hands quickly and let him create something after the catch. Now, is Juju Smith-Schuster have a bit of an injury history behind him at this point? And is he one bad hit away from a knee or an Achilles exploding? Absolutely. But is the likelihood that that is going to happen this week in this matchup I would say chances are it is less likely that you're going to tear an ACL than it is that you're not going to tear an ACL. It doesn't matter how frail you are. So I would say with Juju Smith-Schuster, if there is any possible chance that you have another expendable piece and you can get both of them, I know that's a complete cop-out. Enjoy the ride. But Juju Smith-Schuster for now, I think that is a very real thing because in that offense, they kind of want that quick guy that they can dump it off to. And I'm going to talk in a little bit as to why that's going to work for you fantasy-wise, and it hasn't necessarily worked very well for Patrick Mahomes. But we're going to get there in a little bit. Our boy, Crispy B.
Hi, Chris.
Chris Battistel, we love you, buddy. Evening, fellas. Is it now time to sell high on indie wide receivers with Anthony Richardson coming back soon?
Where are these high buyers in leagues on the Indianapolis wide receivers necessarily? Now, maybe they might be high to buy high for the Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, but no, I think that's a fair question. I'm mostly just talking, shit about the Indianapolis wide receivers, but I do agree that I think that they collectively regress with Richardson back, which is crazy to think that Joe Flacco is the fantasy supporter of both Michael Pittman and Josh Downs, but it's the truth. I mean, we've watched it all season. We've watched it in each game that Anthony Richardson's played.
Yeah. And I mean, Joe Flacco, once again, with him being in there, it's kind of helped buoy some of these waters a little bit. He wasn't great last week fantasy-wise, but I mean, Josh Downs with Joe Flacco in the lineup has been better. So getting back to our past players for the week, Nate, I'm ready to break your heart. Yep. I'm ready for my heart to be broken. Because I have to go against Alvin Kamara this week because first off, with the way the Saints have played over the past month, I'm bitter, I'm upset, I'm frustrated. The Saints have had no real passing game, no real running game. Alvin Kamara has been banged up here and there. He did find the end zone last week, but he also averaged a paltry 3.1 yards per attempt. With Spencer Rattler in the game, who, by the way, did have some moments where he wasn't bad last week. He's got some scrambling ability that Derek Carr doesn't. So, therefore, a lot of Alvin Kamara's value is in those dump-offs, right? You would think with a backup quarterback that Alvin Kamara would be the Saints' target leader last week, correct?
I would think that, yeah. I would have taken that bet.
You would be wrong.
What?
Because the Saints' target leader last week was my savior, Bub Means. Bub Means, 8 targets, 5 catches, 45 yards on a touchdown last week.
You heard yourself. You heard that stat line, right?
5 for 45 and a tutty. Yeah, I heard it.
Yeah. I hate to say that I'm excited about that, but that is for Spencer Rattler. That's an exciting stat line to start off in week 1. We're first game with him, I will admit.
Let's go. It's tough waters right now, man. We're selling in tough waters. This game, fantasy wise, Denver, New Orleans, with the way, first off, can we just go one step further and why you just don't want to have any Saints players this week? Bub Means has to go against Patrick Surtain. And if that isn't a deterrent for you, then I don't know what is at this point. My God.
What is Pat Surtain's status, though? He left the game last week. He went into the medical tent, and I will tell you, I haven't kept real good tabs on like if it was something that is going to linger into this week or not. Let me check that thing.
I'm looking at it right now. It says there was a brain injury for Pat Surtain. He sustained a concussion early in the loss.
He's ruled out.
Yeah, so
Ian Rappaport, says he's out.
We're back, baby. We're back with Bub Means this week.
Bub Means.
All right, so all I'm saying right now is that it's just an interesting time to be a Saints fantasy owner. With a player like Alvin Kamara, you just have to assume that Denver is going to challenge the Saints to beat them on the outside in the passing game, which means the Alvin Kamara rushing upside is very capped this week, no matter what. So it just kind of feels like this is one of those stay away games with a quarterback entering his second career start on a short week with a banged up receiving core. Alvin Kamara, I'm just not feeling comfortable with the play this week on pretty much any Saints player, but especially Kamara.
You know, I'm gonna say I give you props for you. That is a very polarizing take that you have to take one or the other. You could have very easily stood in the middle and said pander to both sides, kind of a political approach, if you will. But you said no. You said no. This is an easy opportunity for me to say, all you people that believe that without the passing weapons, I'm going to lean that Alvin Kamara is an easy smash here. But you said no. I don't trust it. And I will tell you, as much Alvin Kamara, rostership that I have, I do worry going forward with him. And I worry that the sell window might have been drastically closed on my fingers without me even knowing I didn't expect it to drop off this fast with the injury. So we shall see. But here, answer this question for old Chris here, because in this, with the aforementioned Indianapolis wide receivers, he has a deal. He can ship the new Bill, Amari Cooper, and Josh Downs, Travis Kelce, and DeAndre Swift. And it's half point PPR, but it's half point tight end premium.
Yeah, that's I feel like that's one you need to do. We could be in the middle of the annual DeAndre Swift 4-game smash sweepstakes where he falls off a cliff. After that, or this could finally be the year where he has an offensive coordinator that makes it work out for him. Either way, DeAndre Swift is immensely frustrating. That being said, Travis Kelce in an offense where they're going to need to get targets somewhere, because like we just mentioned, Juju Smith-Schuster, while productive last week, is probably a short-term fix. Xavier Worthy hasn't really shown it yet. Isaiah Pacheco still out. Kareem Hunt, 29 years old. Once again, probably on borrowed time. So that leaves Travis Kelce as your most reliable player in that offense. So I think it's a smash accept on your part, Chris.
And Scampers knows, just like you said, as the fantasy gods have foretold, it means it's going to be Mason Tipton and the Cedric Wilson Jr. week. Yep, I fully expect that.
Bub, Mason, and Cedric sounds like a Little Rascals bit going horribly wrong, but that's just me.
It does. I like it. Tay.
All right. So speaking of players who have simply been Tay so far this season.
Very good.
Nate, go ahead and talk about your second pass player for the week. And he's got a quarterback change going on with him, huh?
He does. And he's more lovable than Buckwheat. Not really. He's not at all. Buckwheat was great. But I talked about George Pickens earlier, and it's like, God, we're so close to him. He's on the precipice of just getting back to that, what we expected. We see it week in and week out. He has these huge opportunities. We see him with the ball in his hands and we go, okay, as long as they can continue to feed him, because Calvin Austin doesn't need that many targets. Roman Wilson, the entire Steelers offense as a whole, but yet in 4 of 6 games, he's had less than 60 yards, less than 10 fantasy points in a full point, PPR leagues. Could the quarterback change be beneficial? I think it will be. I really do. I do believe that the targets will be, probably more boring, but I think we'll see an uptick in actual targets. In the full point, PPR league where you can gain 2 or 3 points just on a few extra catches. Yes, but it's the Jets this week. And if I'm going to look at a blend of a quarterback change and 4 weeks of disappointment, I still have optimism, but I have to temper my expectations. I think there's just better options out there. It's tricky right now because it's going to be DJ Reed and a blend of Sauce Gardner. So, oh man, I hate whenever I make picks that go against like 80% of the teams when I have them on so many, because I'm not going to bench them in most leagues. But if I had that many good options, I'm going to.
Yeah. And you kind of hit the nail on the head for me. The Jets are really, really, really good at the cornerback position.
Yeah.
Like abnormally good. So starting anybody against them most weeks, even on a week where there's not a quarterback change. This could be let's just use this as an example of an offense that has kind of been thriving this week. This could be the Baltimore Ravens against the New York Jets. And it's hard for me to put faith in those pass catchers against those cornerbacks. I mean, now if that was Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson rushing upside, might be a different animal, but still a really good defense. And those cornerbacks are especially good. So yeah, I'm with you on the pass. It's just hard to find where the confidence is right now with that. And speaking of lack of confidence, Nate, this one hurts me. It hurts me. And as your parents used to say whenever they were getting ready to, I give you a little bit of corporal punishment back in the day. This is going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you because it's not, and it was never true, to be honest with you.
Hurt me a lot
never
more.
True.
Liar.
Yeah. But Patrick Mahomes against the San Francisco 49ers. Let's just call a spade a spade. Patrick Mahomes is absolutely the best real quarterback in football. That being said, we're at a point in his career we are in Patrick Mahomes' Tom Brady managing the game, get the ball out quick era, which makes him a middling fantasy football quarterback. So far this season, despite the fact that he's had very solid numbers, he's finished in 5 games. Quarterback 13, quarterback 14, quarterback 15, quarterback 17, quarterback 15. Translation: Patrick Mahomes is a solid quarterback 2 in fantasy football right now. He's fine in Superflex. You're going to start him in Superflex, but he's not a guy that you can plug and play on a weekly basis in your 1 quarterback leagues. He's last among starting quarterbacks, 32nd in the league in deep ball attempts so far this season. He is 16th in total passing yards. He's 31st in air yards. He's 19th in fantasy points per dropback. And this is maybe the most alarming numbers for me because Patrick Mahomes is noted for his accuracy, correct? Patrick Mahomes can pick a defense apart. Patrick Mahomes is 15th in completion percentage against man coverage and 13th against completion percentage against zone coverage. He is firmly entrenched as a quarterback 2 in fantasy football. And don't get me wrong, there's going to be a Patrick Mahomes game this year where he throws 4 touchdowns and everyone is going to get back in his corner.
Mm-hmm.
But Nate, he threw for 331 last week. He had 8.5 yards per attempt in his last game and he finished as quarterback 15. Those should be quarterback 1 numbers. 331 should lead to 3 touchdowns. We should be talking about the Patrick Mahomes renaissance. It hasn't happened. So we know Patrick Mahomes is the best real game quarterback. Has the Patrick Mahomes fantasy era passed us by? Or am I just going to look very stupid in a couple weeks?
No, that's the thing is that you said earlier, real NFL teams make trades with no regard for you or I fantasy teams. And Patrick Mahomes will lead this team with no regard to your fantasy production because
100%.
At the end of the day, a victory is a victory. And it may be, and I think we kind of saw it 2 years ago. It was in the last 3 years is they're giving them everything short to intermediate, which doesn't typically translate to fantasy production unless it's a ton of yak, which we saw out of Juju last week. With Kelsey, we always potentially see that, and Xavier Worthy has that upside. So yeah, you're right. One of these weeks, it'll be a 29 for 38 game for 345 and 3 touchdowns, and we're gonna go up. Here we go, and then the next week will be for 225 and 1 touchdown. But as long as they win the game, I don't think he really cares.
Now, you really don't care, especially because you're a big Chiefs guy.
I don't. Yeah.
No, you don't care at all.
I do want him to do well. I have him in a league. So pick it up a little, Patrick. Come on.
Let's get it together, bud. So to recap our past players, we talked about Jordan Mason. Alvin Kamara, George Pickens, and Patrick Mahomes. And before we get out of here, we want to highlight one stash player from each of us. Once again, a player that is rostered in under 50% of sleeper leagues. Nate, I've got questions in your faith right now with this offense, with this quarterback, with the state of everything. But you're a smart dude, so talk me into Elijah Moore and the Cleveland Browns and as to why he is a stash player at the moment.
They have to move on from Deshaun Watson. At some point, you can't continue the Deshaun Watson experience. It has to progress to Jameis Winston at some point. Has to. And when it does, Elijah Moore will sit there because Jerry Jeudy's proven he's not that great. We know that. Target volume will probably see an increase as a result of losing Amari Cooper. But I got to think at some point, if you're listening, Cleveland Browns, please. I don't know what sick, twisted curse this is that you're playing on the NFL and NFL fans in general, making us watch Deshaun Watson, but it's gotta stop. It's horrendous. So this is my optimism that it will move from that quarterback situation and it will elevate Elijah Moore to be at least a serviceable, like wide receiver 5 flex play option for your team that will be on your bench, deep bench.
And yeah, I mean, like you said, that seems to be contingent upon whether Deshaun Watson and his mighty, mighty healthy contract continue to hold the Cleveland Browns hostage. But before we get into my stash player for the week, our boy Scampers wants to know a half PPR, Tucker Kraft versus Houston, or Mark Andrews at Tampa Bay.
You want to start?
I'm all in on Tucker Kraft right now, man.
Me too.
Tucker Kraft is such a dog. Yeah. I traded him a couple weeks ago and I regretted it immediately. But you know what? Got a first round pick back, so I guess it could have been worse. I'm in Dynasty, but I mean, God, he's probably creeping in Dynasty formats up near being a top 5 Dynasty asset among tight ends right now. I mean, he's just been really good. There were questions as to whether it was going to be Luke Musgrave or Tucker Kraft. Green Bay has answered that question very clearly. It's Tucker Kraft, and it will be for the very foreseeable future.
And so the one thing is, yes, Kraft is banged up a little bit. The worst matchup on paper without taking into context what happened to Houston. Houston's linebackers already without Christian Harris also lost Henry To'oTo'o as well as Azeez Al-Shaair. So important pieces across the middle of that defense that should help elevate Tucker Kraft, et cetera, in terms of what we've seen on paper as a difficult matchup has gotten easier.
Yeah. And I mean, so I think we're both looking at Tucker Kraft as a person who we want to start this week. As for players that I want to stash and possibly even start, we talked about the murder game already. That is New Orleans and Denver this week. But I'm going to say this, and I tweeted this out a couple weeks ago, is that this year with Bo Nix playing quarterback for the Denver Broncos, that slot receiver position has been sneaky productive. And in the midst of bye weeks right now, Devon Villay in Denver has some sneaky upside for you. Yeah, he's missed quite a bit of time this year, but in the 2 games he's played this year, in PPR formats in that season opener against the Seattle Seahawks, he had 8 receptions for 39 yards, which once again, not a great number, but 12 fantasy points in full PPR. Last week against the Los Angeles Chargers, 6 targets, 4 receptions, 78 yards. Once again, knocking around 12 fantasy points. So we're in bye weeks right now. And in these bye weeks, you need people who are just going to give you a solid floor. And it just seems like Bo Nix and Devon Villay kind of have developed a little bit of a rapport here. Not to mention that one of Sean Payton's all-time favorite guys that he coached up in New Orleans was a 7th round, long, lanky receiver by the name of Marcus Colston, arguably the best receiver in franchise history. So Sean Payton sees a long, lean wide receiver that can quite simply get open and make a few things happen. Sean Payton is not a dog who's willing to learn new tricks. I've learned that over the years. So if he sees a potential Marcus Colston clone in Devon Valet, who is currently only owned in 2% of sleeper leagues as of this morning, I think he's one of these guys you kind of have to monitor as a flex slot guy in these bye weeks moving forward.
Yeah. And so far, the stash plays on the week on this show have actually been panning out. I mean, we've seen each week consistently from players like, Eric All, who you mentioned, Kamani Vidal. There's a few others where we're seeing weeks 6, 7, and week 8. These would be waiver wire top 5 or 6 guys that if you can get in a week early, you save yourself a lot of fab and a lot of waiver priority. So great show, Rhett.
Great show, Nate. Good job by you, buddy.
You too, man. So much fun.
So, guys, as we do every week, we want to thank you for spending time with us. You could be taking in content in a lot of different places. It's literally all over the internet. I mean, there are people who are far better looking than us, probably had better voices. Okay, I'll speak for myself here, Nate. I'm sorry. But nonetheless, you guys choose to hang out with us on a weekly basis, and we do appreciate that. So Nate, before we get out of here, anything you want to gas up right now? Anybody that you've been listening to? Any research? Anything you got going on? What's up, man?
Man, there's two. I'm going to take the easy cop out and say there's too many to name because I try to gather as much knowledge from everybody that I surround myself with as possible. And I know I'm going to leave someone out, but I can tell you that just the collective group here at Fantasy and Frames, everybody is, so sharp. Like I really would love to take a step back and just be a content, not even provider, but like just a fan for a minute and go, holy hell, how did I get to be involved with all of you guys? Because I'm in awe of the knowledge that you guys have. And come on, scampers. You know what? I was getting ready to say that all the people that we interact with, and not that I want the Mets to win or anything either, but the Dodgers, damn it, scampers. Go ahead. I lost my train of thought. I was being all nice, and then talks about the Dodgers, who I'm sick of.
Yeah. Anyway, so great team over at Fantasy and Frames on a weekly basis. Those waiver wire articles, the waiver wire show that we run on Tuesday nights. The pregame show on Sunday, hosted by the man right next to me, Mr. Nate Markham. What a program! What a guy! What a team we have over here. And so, guys, we're gonna go ahead. We're gonna get out of here tonight. Once again, thank you all of you for spending time with us tonight. For my boy Nate Markham, for my boy Drew Scott, who isn't on camera but is with us as always in spirit. I'm Rhett Manuel. You can find him at Nate Markham on X. You can find Drew at Drew3Mar on X. I am at RManuel Sports on X. And as our typical sign out is on a weekly basis, toodles.
This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.